Thank you. My screen is being shared. We're all good. You can see my slides.
Yes, it looks great.
Beautiful. That is the high school in Yellowknife, and it was very cold that day, and the kids were playing. And I remember coming home to my home province of Ontario and saying, if the kids in Yellowknife can play hockey outside at recess and lunch when it's minus 30s, I gotta get my kid outside a little bit more often, that's for sure. Hello everyone, thank you so much for joining me for this quick chat on physical literacy and inclusion. And I'm gonna share a few sort of ideas, some thoughts. I'm gonna show you a tool that I find really helpful for myself and my college students, and then I can hang around for questions if you have any. If not, that's cool too. Our relationship is just getting started, so maybe we'll reach out later on. I've been listening to many of the presentations already and really enjoyed my day. I've been in and out because I had some classes to teach today, but I've been enjoying it for sure. So before I really get into this, I would like to take a minute to acknowledge that I'm on the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabes people, whose presence continues to this day. This territory is also referred to as Markham, Ontario. I would also like to acknowledge the land I am on is at the meeting place of two treaties, the lands of the Mississauga of the Credit and those of the First Nation of the Williams Treaty. I would like to thank them and other Indigenous peoples for sharing their land with us. I would also like to acknowledge the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation as our closest Indigenous community. And it truly is an honor to live and play. I raised my family on this land. I'm an uninvited guest here, and I think about that often, as were those of my family before. I'd like to tell you a little bit more about me. For those of you who know me, you might know these things, or maybe you don't, I don't know, but I want to share who I am so you know where my knowledge and experience is coming from. And that picture is taken in Slave, no, where was I? I was in Hay River. It was freezing, and that was an accidental selfie. I didn't mean to say. I had my phone in my hand and I took a picture, and it's an accidental selfie. And I love that picture because when you're in the North, you cannot be nothing but happy. That's just a pure happiness experience from the North. And I wanted to share that with you. So my name is Sarah. I go by the pronouns of she, her, and hers. I'm a cisgender female and a member of the LGBTQ community. What that means is I'm raising my daughter, my 9-year-old daughter, with my partner, Maya. My daughter's name is Ayla, and I have a Great Dane Bull Mastiff mix named Hamilton, who's about 180 pounds, and you might hear him barking in the background at some point. I grew up on the unceded traditional territories of the Matski, Kwantlen, Katsi, and Semiahmoo First Nations, and then I sort of relocated again and grew up sort of my young womanhood age in Coast Salish territory. So I'm a West Coaster, born and raised, and I'm going to share a little bit about that experience with you in a minute. I currently work at Seneca College, and I have a consulting business, which is where I got to do lots of cool different things. And you heard some of that in the introduction, so thank you for that. What I really want you to know about me is I love coffee. It's always right here. I love Lego, and you can see some of my favorites behind me. I really do. I collect it. I love it. It's an expensive hobby, but I love it. And I love adventure, just new things, new experiences, new people. I just love getting out and doing things. I really, truly get a kick and fulfillment out of that. I think that's why I love my job so much, because it's never the same. It's never boring. Something always is happening. So this conference is about telling stories, and I want to start a little bit about sharing my story with you. I grew up, as I told you, on the West Coast. I grew up in Langley, British Columbia, and there are some pictures of my upbringing. I thought that for those of you who I've met before, you might be interested in seeing some of these pictures from the 70s. On the left there is myself and my little sister, and we were together always. Lots of unsupervised play outside. Our first pet was rabbits. And there's a rabbit there. I don't remember that rabbit or the name of that rabbit, but clearly it looks like I'm providing it some love there. There is a picture of us in the middle celebrating Christmas, as in you can see I cut my own bangs in that picture. I'm in the middle left, so I didn't get into hairdressing, but I did cut my own bangs there. But I was just surrounded by fun and interesting things, and just outside, no TV, on the land, playing, engaging. Just a really cool childhood. And that is a picture of my family, and that hat, and I guess I don't even know where we are in that picture. we're holding monkeys, and that hat is a hat. There's a bear on that hat. I wore it nonstop for my entire childhood. So I was really fortunate, and I need to remember that and learn about the opportunities that I had as a young person growing up. Just a few more pictures to show you. There I am with that hat on. Again, I spent a lot of time outside. That's us in our driveway on a hike. And then things started to kind of really come into play when I was graduating high school. So that is me in a dress, which I did not wear very often. And I remember putting those high heel shoes on and practicing walking in my kitchen with those high heel shoes on. I'm still not good at walking in high heel shoes, but this is me. I had to do a speech at my graduation. I had an award and was voted grad of the year, whatever that means. And over the years, this moment, I really reflect on this moment, as I think this is where I learned that I have a gift to share knowledge with others and make people laugh and feel safe. And that's something that I take really seriously. And it started there, and it's been sort of my life's work is to really think about what this means, the words I say, the things that I do, the things that I'm learning and experiencing. So last slide of pictures for you. There's me and my family on the left-hand side with our Canada toques on. There's my dog in the middle. We went skiing yesterday. So on the top right, there is a picture of my daughter. She fell down, and I'm the type of parent who likes to take a picture before I offer up assistance. So this is me taking a photo of my kid who face planted in the snow. She was kind of whining and laughing and giggling all at the same time. She wasn't hurt or anything. And then the below is just us getting out. We try to get out and just walk or move in the areas in which I live as much as I can. So that's just a little bit about me. So today we're talking about physical literacy and inclusion, and these topics are really starting to come together for me more recently. I don't know if it's because of the reflection work I've been doing and the sort of new opportunities I've had with other organizations, the new learning. What I want to say before I really dig into our talk today is you are all really welcome here, and I mean that. And when we create a welcoming environment, I find a lot of leaders, they say, you're welcome here, but you have to be these ways. You have to act this way. And I think to be truly inclusive and to be truly welcoming, we need to invite our people as they are. And because we are all in different spaces and places around, I want to invite you as you are. So do your best to bring your full self to this space today. That is your vulnerability, your joy, your negativity, your cynicism, your confidence, your optimism, your insecurities, your hopes, your fears. Maybe you're mad at me. Maybe you don't like what I'm saying. That is all welcome here. You are truly welcome here. And I hope that you will feel that by the end of this. So thank you for being here and choosing this session. And I hope that we can get a few things out of it today. My computer just died. Can you see? Is there a tech person there? I just lost my, hold on a second, everyone.
We can see your desktop, Sarah.
Hold on, everyone. Let me pull it up again. I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Let me try that again. Just as I was about to get to a good slide. So hold on, let me pull it up again. We'll try that again. I'll launch again.
There's a beautiful background photo, though. It's a gorgeous mountain.
Thank you. That was in Victoria, where I'm from.
Oh, wow.
I know. I don't know what I'm doing in Ontario. Okay, let's pull this back up again. Sorry about that, everybody. Let's try that again. And let's go. Let's play from here. Okay, hold on. I don't know what's happening here. Hold on. Let's share again. Share. Let me know if you can see my desktop, and then I will get back into it.
Yes, we can. Oh. Yeah, we can see the desktop and the PowerPoint. There we go.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. So Canadian kids, we know already, we just had a participation report card. And I just have to say to those participation people, I love your report cards. I use it all the time. Please keep up the good work. In 2016, the report said, we are sitting too much. Our kids are sitting too much. And this is pre-COVID. And this is why I'm so excited that I get to talk to you today. Because we have such an opportunity as kids are returning to program and as the kids are returning. So before COVID, we started talking about how kids are just sitting too much to reach their full potential. As a physical literacy person and an educator, what that means to me is when kids enter into the gymnasium or on our sports fields or in our arenas, they don't have the physical fitness. They don't have the confidence, the competence, the motivation to engage like they used to because they're sitting. So those skills are being taken away. They're spending more time alone than they've ever had before. Now, this is not something we don't know. I've listened to many of you. I know some of you out there. We already know this, but what are we doing about it? I think that's the question I want to consider. So before COVID, we already knew that things were getting a little scary. Good things too, right? I got to say, as a parent, having my kid at home for COVID was not a terrible thing. I didn't mind it. It was nice having her around. So some of the research, this is my professor piece of me, some of my research that I was looking at, just some basic things I want to show you and things that you've probably already seen, but I think it helps set the context for the conversation I want to have with you today. The impacts of COVID-19, we're looking at 1 in 4 girls, according to the Canadian Women in Sport, 1 in 4 girls will not be returning to sport. And we already know that our girl dropout rates were so much higher than the boy dropout rates. So 1 in 4 girls, that is essentially 350,000 Canadian girls. Now, when we look at this with an intersectional perspective, what are we looking at when we look at remote communities, young children from different environments, right? Different ethnic races and communities and cultures and religions. Those were already participating at lower rates. So 350,000 Canadian girls not returning to sport. I found this article from April 2021, where it talks about 1 in 5 Canadian youth will not be returning to sport. Canadian youth miss sport. They miss it. They're all telling us they miss it. And they're all telling us they want to get back to it. But when surveys are put out there, whether the child is answering or the parent is answering, consistently we're seeing pop up that about 1 in 5 Canadian youth will not be returning, or they do not intend to return once the COVID restrictions are lifted. And I don't know what it's like where you are all situated, but where I am in Ontario, they're just starting to lift now. Sport is starting to happen again, and that's a great thing. So this is our opportunity to make sure that when kids come back, we do the right thing. When you looked at, I don't know if any of you out there were watching, I saw Beth Hudson's presentation today, and you saw her pictures. And when you're in the room with Beth, you know the kind of impact she has on others. And how do we make a million Beths? Because we're going to burn her out if we continue to use her for all the things. How do we build an environment where we can do it right? We can do it well. And that's the kind of thing I want to talk to you about. We're going to talk about some tools in a second. Before we dig a little bit into that, I want you to consider what inclusion means. What is it? What does it mean to you? Do you like that word? Not everyone I work with in the inclusion space likes that word. I like the word, and I think that's because I've had a life of privilege. I understand it as an action word. It's something that I can do to help others. It helps me, gives me a tool. But I also know how it feels to be on the other end of this, coming from the LGBTQ community. But I want to know and think about this for your own self. And if you're with me, you can certainly write it in the chat. What are the words? If a 10-year-old came up to you or an 8-year-old came up to you and said, what does inclusion mean to you? What is that? What would you say? What does it mean to you? And what does an inclusive leader look like? When we want to lead with inclusion, what does that look like? I'm going to tie this into physical literacy in a second. But inclusion, what is it? What does it mean? And how do we put it in? So I see something in the chat here, acceptance. I think we all know what it feels like to be not accepted and to not fit in and to feel different and to feel like the only one. And we know that that feels crappy. We don't like the way that feels. So what I did is I did a little search. And I wanted to see what inclusion means, belonging. Oh, Kristen, I love that word. That is a word. And how much work it takes for us to find that, right? I think I'm solely finding it. Brene Brown, I'm digressing for a second, but I got her new book right here. Brene Brown talks about fitting in is the opposite of belonging. We need to show up as who we are. That's belonging. We get to be exactly who we are, and that's accepted for that. We don't have to think about, do I be less Black today, less female today, less gay today? I want to show up who I am. Yeah, Spider, those are good words. You're important, you matter, you belong. And those are feelings almost, aren't they? So what does inclusion mean to you? Well, inclusion from this place, I just Googled. I didn't even look at research. I didn't even back it up. I just wanted to find things that I thought were interesting. Inclusion refers to the active practice of including and accommodating people who have historically been excluded. So there's a specific meaning there. And these people have been excluded, and these are many of us today because of their race, gender, sexuality, or ability. So the active practice of including and accommodating people who have been historically excluded. I think that sometimes is where that idea of exclusion comes from. Oh, Chess, I see you there. Yeah, not only being invited to the party, but wanting to dance when you get there. Oh, I love that. I got a little emotional when I read that. So according to Forbes magazine, diversity is what you see. Inclusion is what we do. I like that one. Inclusion is what we do. And that's what inclusion means to me, and the work I do with Inclusion Incorporated is about the doing. Inclusion is seen as universal, Inclusion is seen as universal human right. The aim of inclusion is to embrace all people, irrespective of race, gender, disability, medical, or other need. It is about giving equal access and opportunity and getting rid of discrimination and intolerance. Breaking down those barriers, it affects all aspects of public life. So I just grabbed that, and there's the website for you. So this morning on my way to work, or on the way to school, I walked my daughter to school this morning and her friend Julie, and I said to the kids, I got to talk about inclusion and physical literacy today. And they know what physical literacy is. Inclusion, I've got to do some work on. So I say to my daughter, Ayla, what is inclusion? What does that mean to you? She goes, oh, when you include someone in something, is what she said. So that's 9 years old. And then her friend Julie, she goes, I don't know, maybe about all of us. It's about all of us. I think inclusion means all of us, like you and me and Ayla. And I was walking my dog Hamilton with us in Hamilton, like that we feel good. And I thought that was interesting explanations from the children that were around me. There was a little Annie there, a little grade 1 was also there. And I said, Annie, what does inclusion mean to you? And she goes, I don't know. So there's little Annie's answer. But I think we need to do the work to understand what this means before we can put this into practice. And I think that's an important part of the physical literacy conversation. I'm going to dig in a little bit about that in a second, but what does it mean to you and what is it represented? And I think it's an interesting question, especially when you're working in remote communities, Indigenous communities. What is it that it means to them? And we need to be aware that it means different things to different people. You could pull up a million academic definitions supported by research, but I think it really means what it means to the people you're working with and what that act of it is. And you can see we've got a bunch of people participating in the chat today, and we're figuring out that it means different things to different people, but we have some similarities there, right? So here's an image that I found that I liked. It's something we use at Inclusion Incorporated, which is a company I work for, and we look at changing the environment. Oh, thanks. Oh, there's Beth. Beth's popped on there. Beth, I'm reading your chat. Yeah, yes, I know. Beth and I both work there. It's a great place. So what I'm learning is a couple of things. So diversity is how we differ. And this is the scary part of that word. It's about separation, or it becomes sometimes about separation, but I really think it's the best part of us. When I sit with people like Beth and Thorsten and we're in the same place, the differences of who they are, what make them interesting and intriguing, and what makes me learn and connect to them. It's what pulls us together, in my opinion. But of course, there's separation, right? We are different people and we have our own uniqueness. So this slide talks about diversity is all the way we differ. Equity is that fair treatment, access, and opportunity. As an educator, I am starting to learn, and I'm only in the pathway of learning and maybe unlearning, that when I'm in an environment, when I'm coaching or teaching, that it's easy for the voices that are confident, have had opportunity, who speak probably English first, who have the same religion as the environment that I'm in. Often they're male and white. It's easy for their voices to be shared. So my job as facilitator, when I think about inclusion, is to make sure I ask questions in different ways, in different formats, and I have different ways to reach every single person that I'm working with. And that is difficult. That is difficult. You know, Beth and I could talk to you for hours about how hard it is to teach it in a right way, how to make sure we really, truly have an inclusive, child-focused, athlete-centered session. It takes a lot. So I'm hopefully going to show you something that will help you. Really, what I wanted to show you about this slide at the end is inclusion. It's a variety of people. They have power, they have a voice, and they have decision-making authority. We are all on the same space, and it's not the way the world is operated now. Systematically is not how that works. But we need to understand that part of it. So those kids in your classes, those kids in your spaces that are speaking up first all the time, we need to make sure we figure out how to reach the others. So how does this fit into inclusion? I mean, into physical literacy? I got to time check myself here. How does it figure and fit into physical literacy? Okay, here's something we're all experts in, right? Physical literacy, the beauty of physical literacy, what inspires me about physical literacy is physical competence. We're going beyond skill, right? We want to teach somebody how to move properly. That talked about on the land. When I talk about in the more structured space, like the gymnasiums, the ice centers, that, you know, where kids go do sports, it's so much more than that piece. And what Sport for Life tells us is that it is a truly inclusive concept. So we need to know what that means. And when you hear people talk about physical literacy, we don't talk often enough about that inclusion piece of it. So this slide breaks all the text down. I know we're not supposed to have this much text on the slide. I know, I'm sorry. I just loved the words here. They're not mine. They're Andrea Carey's words, but I want to share it with you. Physical literacy is symbiotic with inclusion. By developing physical literacy, you intentionally plan and create inclusion in society. That is the magic, because it works for the individual. We're looking at an intersectional perspective of what that individual needs. And then it spreads out to friends, building friendships, family, career opportunities, and then across your whole life, cradle to grave. I've been thinking a lot about the grave part as I'm 47. So I'm creeping up on, I'm kind of halfway, and, it makes you think about things. Inclusion isn't perfect. Barriers still exist, but overall the goal is to remove these barriers and improve the lives of those. It is a holistic, multifaceted approach to developing personal skill sets. Physical literacy is a holistic, multifaceted approach to developing physical and personal skill sets. Some things we need to consider, which we know already, we've heard a couple times already today, is the attitudes, communication tools, accessible facilities and equipment, and programs and services need to be looked at. But what I want to talk about today is those individuals that are standing in front of the people and standing in front of the kids. That's what I want to talk about today. So I've linked the website in on this. I grabbed it off the Abilities website. And it's important that we really start to dig into the inclusive perspective of physical literacy. So sure, it gets better athletes. Sure, we win better medals. We have a healthier community, a happier community. Right? But also we have a more inclusive community. And that to me is really important here. So a couple of organizations that I've already kind of got it. And I want to really highlight the inclusive messages here. There's others, but I want to give you a snapshot of this. High Five is child-centered. Who's those kids in front of us? High Five is an amazing organization. I do quite a bit of work from them, but they talk about that caring leader. We know from research that the person at the front of the room has the most impact on the program. The most impact on the program. It is a child-centered, or Sport for Life, it likes to use the word athlete-centered. High Five uses the word, your programs must be inclusive of welcoming of diversity and uniqueness. That is inclusion. And Sport for Life talks about inclusion being, there's 4 pillars or 4 values or characteristics of long-term athletic development or long-term development. And one of those 4, let's see if I can remember them all. Spider, you might have to help me out. I don't have it in front of me. I think it's optimal. Inclusion is non-negotiable. Collaboration, and there's another one. There's the 4th. I forget the 4th. But the point I want to highlight here is this whole framework is based on these 4 pillars. One of those being inclusion is non-negotiable. It cannot be successful without those elements. So when we're digging deep in physical literacy and we're really looking at it, I think that's an element that we can really start to pull out. So when we look at flourishing, right, that's a research word. It's about reaching potential, doing really well. All parents, coaches, and adults want our kids that we work with to flourish, to meet their full potential, to be awesome people. You know, I'm trying to change the conversation when I'm around kids, and I'm trying to be, you know, think about when I ask questions like, what are you going to be when you grow up? I'm trying to change that to, you know, when you grow up, I hope you're super happy. I hope you find those things that, you know, help you find the things that make you feel good about who you are. They can do that in any avenue, right? Whatever they want to do. So similarities between human flourishing, right? Success and physical literacy. So I'm going back to our founder of physical literacy, Margaret Whitehead, right? This is an old research paper. You can grab it if you want to read it. It's actually a pretty easy read. But we're talking about relationships between physical literacy and human flourishing. It's the importance of physical literacy in relation to maximizing human potential. What this article goes on to talk about is that it is inherently inclusive. It has to be inclusive of those people that are in front of you. If that person or people, they don't feel that sense of safety, they feel that sense of belonging that you talked about in the chat, they will not flourish. They will not flourish. A lot of young leaders out there, everyone, and don't be mistaken by this, and research has shown this as well, but a lot of people out there, a lot of leaders think that inclusion means, okay, I have 10 kids that are this way, excuse me, and I have 1 kid that's in a wheelchair. Okay, I'm going to pull that kid in. That's inclusion. I have 5 kids that are from this religion and 1 kid that's from a different religion. That's inclusion, making sure that kid feels inclusive. We have to understand that it is so much more than that. So when we look at physical literacy and we look at human flourishing, what the original research is really digging into, it is objectively good according to the participants. And what that means is happiness. It's got to be a feeling of happiness. Now, happiness to a higher performance athlete can be like intense competition. But when we're looking at kids, we're looking at that ability to bring out the happiness, the good life, something that feels good to us. It's a good experience. Now, good experience doesn't mean it's not hard. It can be challenging. Excuse me. I taste more. Let me talk about human flourishing when it looks at inclusivity, right? You got to feel safe. And this, I think sometimes we don't talk about this. This was me as a person, and I'm learning how to be an ally and to stick up. But what I also think about too is when somebody else in my group is struggling, I feel being left out, has less physical skill than others, I am stressed. I feel that I want to help and contribute, and it's hard to do when you're not the leader in the room. And when I was a child, I really struggled with that. It is an individualized approach. It's agent dependent, which means the person that is involved in the process, the human element, need to contribute and understand and be on the same page. So if what works for one group, right, might not work for the next. That's okay. We got to make the shift. It is self-directed and it is socially constructed. It's got to be around socialization, friends. We know this. I know you already know this, but this is just to get that conversation going. So how do we do this? What do we do with all this information? That's probably what you're sitting there thinking. Sarah Gallsworthy, what do we do with this information? I think I've been practicing something with my students. It's not groundbreaking or mind-blowing, but I want to show you something. Before I get there, I want to talk to you about this. I read over COVID, I read Glennon Doyle's Untamed. Everybody was reading it, and I felt like I needed to jump on the bandwagon here and read this. And what I found is this quote, and I just love it. And this gets me excited about returning to sport. This is what Glennon says. I find myself worrying most when we hand our children phones. We steal their boredom from them. When we give them a phone or an iPad, we fill that space and we're taking away the ability to be bored. And I tell you, out of COVID, we've got a lot of kids that have been bored. As a result, we are raising a generation of writers who will never start writing, artists who will never start doodling, chefs who will never make a mess in the kitchen, athletes who will never kick a ball against a wall, musicians who will never pick up their aunt's guitar and start strumming. We are coming out of an environment of boredom, and when kids and humans are bored, amazing things can happen. But we have to make sure we really think about pulling in the right people with the right training and the right experience with the right tools, and also creating those environments where kids feel safe and included, right? We're going to draw back from that boredom, get kids excited about sport again, and we can do that. So when you think about leadership and you think about how do we lead physical literacy in the most amazing way, here's a couple of things that I pulled out. And this is something that we talk about in inclusive leadership with Inclusion Incorporated, and this comes from Harvard. The visible commitment, they articulate authentic, so leaders that are inclusive, visible commitment, they articulate authentic commitment to diversity, challenge the status quo, hold others accountable, and make diversity and inclusion a personal priority. I teach at a college where a big percentage of my faculty, the student body that I teach, comes from other countries. And over this particular semester, almost half of my students are in India or from India. And what's really cool is when I'm trying to be a more inclusive leader, what I'm trying to do is make my environment safer. I'm not from India and I don't know what it's like to be there. So what I do is I talk to my students and I invite them to lead with me so that they can help me create a more inclusive experience. And it builds skills in them, and I'm learning. It's just an amazing thing. It's that visible commitment. So when I'm teaching, and I might have an Indian student with me teaching Indian students, it's a visible commitment to this inclusive leadership. Humility. They are modest about capabilities, admit mistakes, create the space that contributes for others. We got to be vulnerable. We already learned from the Grand Chief this morning the importance of stories. I wrote down a note that he said, and I've heard this many times, and I just love it. It's sticking right on my desk right beside me here. That with children, they observe with their eyes, they listen with their ears, and with their minds, they process the message that they observe. These are really great reminders of that whole idea of being vulnerable, admitting mistakes, because the children are watching and listening and processing. We have to be aware of our bias. I'm doing this work now. I'm starting to slowly understand it. I'm starting to feel it. And we need to do that work. So when we're looking at inclusion and physical literacy, we've really got to dig in a little bit on how your own sense of bias. Curious, we are naturally curious of others. Children are naturally curious of others. They demonstrate an open mindset and deep curiosity about others. So inclusive leaders are generally interested and curious about others. They listen without judgment, seek with empathy to understand those around them. There's cultural intelligence, and the last one is effective collaboration. Things we know, but I think this is a really cool thing to put it into the coaches you are hiring, the leaders you are hiring. If you want physical literacy to be really an inclusive concept, we got to throw in an inclusive leader. We got to throw in somebody that has those extras, right? We got to give them the tools. So we're going to look at some tools right now. I want to share with you just a couple of things that I've been using lately, and I'm going to share with you something that I created with a colleague of mine, and I think it really hands down the tools. I want you to kind of set the tone. You're in an environment with a ton of kids. It could be a classroom, a gymnasium, a hockey practice. It could be an out on the land program. And what do we almost always focus on? Beth doesn't, but what do we always focus on? Or what do our young leaders always focus on? They focus on that competency, the physical competency part of physical literacy. They focus on skill and games. It always comes down to the skill. And we know, because physical literacy is an inclusive concept, we need to deal with who we're teaching, how they're doing in that moment that day, and we need to think about those other elements. So when we're working in particular with younger learners, one of the things that I think are really important to think about is really quality, useful lesson plans. The lesson plan does not need to look fancy like this. It could be, and actually many of my lesson plans are sticky notes in my pocket. Sticky notes in my pocket, because I know what I'm doing. I just need reminders. What I want to talk about is when we're looking at supporting young people in our movement environments, is how can we create a space? So this is actually one of my, this is modified from the Coaching Association's lesson plans that they promote. So if you're going to take a course through the Coaching Association of Canada, and you got their coaching certificates, they're going to provide you with lesson plans that look like this. It's slightly modified for one of my students' assignments, but what I want you to highlight is what I've kind of arrowed and circled. In the Coaching Association plan, yes, this plan is all designed to build fundamental movement skills, modified games. We already know how to do that. What it also focuses on is free play. Free play is an amazing opportunity to bring in that inclusive concept into your programs, allowing children to interact with their environment and those around them at the comfort level of the child. That also, in those free play opportunities, that's in the circle there, gives the child the opportunity, and the leader, the opportunity to connect with the child, to find out who this kid is, what they're interested in, what skills they have, do a quick assessment. What is it that this child needs? Free play is also an opportunity to physically warm the child up and create a safe environment. And when we look at building inclusion in our environments, something that we can think about is that free play piece. The other thing is this. Young coaches and staff, or and when I say young, I mean new to it, or maybe those have been around with those older habits, is what we say is so important, and how we say it. We're talking about verbal and nonverbal communication. And we look at those introductory messages when we've got those kids in front of us for the first time. What are we saying? What are we doing to make it seem like we actually care and that they have an important place here? Physical literacy is about building skill, working with that whole child. And if we're going to do that in an inclusive way, we got to really dig deep of who's there, who are those kids that are there, who are those humans that we are teaching. It's the same actually with all of us, all ages. I focus on kids. This is just kind of where my passion sort of zones in on. But the things we say is really important. And I don't think many people talk about that. So I get my college students who are going to be coaching and teaching others. They're going to be working in recreation centers and facilities all across Ontario and Canada. When I want them to think about those first few words out of their mouth. And this is where we get to practice this list, being an inclusive leader, practicing those things that we say. And I'm in a formal environment with you today. One of the tools that I use to show that I am on the pathway of being an inclusive leader is to show you who I am, not my degrees or my education, but to share with me my pronouns and to share with you that I'm from the LGBTQ community, right? I'm showing you my vulnerability. I'm trying to be open. I'm also showing you that I trust you. I trust the space that we're in, even when I'm talking to you through the screen. What we say in the beginning. Now, we might not want to do that with kids. Maybe we do. It's you get to choose. But what I'm thinking, or what I want, what the research is leaning towards is those start and end of programs is such an important part. So those concluding messages, those introductory messages, the things that are coming out of our mouth and what we're doing with our body is important. It is more than skill in this moment. And then we're going to get into some free play. It's more than skill in that moment. And then the skill development comes. And that's what coaches and leaders and educators are so good at. I'm really good at delivering a curriculum element. I can do that. But how I do it is where I put my energy and focus. And when I was that girl in that dress with that glass of water in my hand, That's when I started to really think about the words, the how important those pieces are. Okay, that's one example for you. Right, coaching, lesson plans, right? I think that's a good tool. And I see people on the courts, the fields, they don't have those things. Now, again, you don't need to sit down for hours. Who's got time for this? But really what I think it's really about focusing in on those important elements. Sure, you're going to write down how you're going to teach kids how to kick a soccer ball, but how are you going to talk to them? Celebrate successes. Beth in her session talked about celebrating those small successes. How are we going to do that? What are we going to say? Are we aware that not all kids might understand what we're talking about? All kids might not feel comfortable. Do we care about every child winning an award? My daughter in the hockey game this past week, they won their hockey game, and she scored no goals. She's learning, and she got player of the game. So we're in the car driving home, and we were talking about the game, and she says to me, I got player of the game. I said, I know. How do you feel? Because I could tell something was off. She goes, everybody gets one. Like, I didn't really do anything different. I didn't score any goals. And I tried to talk to her about team dynamics, and she goes, I don't want to be given something just for the sake of being given something. I want to feel that I need to know what to do to earn it. And then I want to earn it. And then I want to get that award when I earn it. And I thought, wow, what an interesting perspective. And, I tried to talk to her about team and acknowledging the team effort. And I think that I wonder if the coaches know that about her, that she would be okay to not get the award, but she wants to know what she needs to do to get it. She wants those clear expectations laid out. And I thought, that is a cool thing for coaches to know. And I'm not so sure the coaches that work with the kids on my daughter's team really are dealing with 15 individuals. They're dealing with 9, 10-year-old hockey players. And they're just teaching them hockey. And I think these are those really beautiful missed opportunities. So that's one thing I think that we should consider. Okay, so here's something, this is an idea. I used to work in injury prevention, and I work for High Five, and I work for Sport for Life, and I work for the Coaching Association, and I work for the college, and I have my own kind of thoughts and opinions and experience. And so what we've done here, so I did a collaboration with Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center, my own business, and we put together, and this is sort of twofold. What we put together is a way, how can we create an inclusive environment, and how do we teach younger people or people that are new in the industry how to create a really positive, inclusive environment? How do they deliver physical literacy in a really creative way? I don't want to teach you how to deliver physical literacy because I think we already know how to do that, but I wanted to give a tool so we could do it better. And I think we're not always answering the right questions. I traveled before COVID. I traveled across the country. I was in many different environments of movement and play with older adults and all the way to children. And I found skill development almost every single time. Now, skill development is important. Kids don't want to join a team or a sport or activity and not learn how to be better at that skill. And that's our job, to get them better. But really what I want to talk about is purposeful programming, where we can tie all this stuff together. Look at the list on this plan. There's nowhere to write the games and activities. Today's program activities have been designed with consideration for healthy development and include the following. So we're trying to create and lay out all the things that need to happen in one lesson every time the children are together, for the kids to feel that they have an inclusive environment. And so they can learn skills faster, more efficiently, in a safer way, and they're going to be more excited to return. And we're not going to have those massive dropout rates that everybody is fearing and that we've had already. So making sure those introductory activities focus on friends, inclusion, and belonging. There's that belonging word that so many of you entered into the chat. So when you're sending out people to teach those programs, like I show up and I just teach. And so many people ask me, that was fun. How do you do that? And I'm now starting to pull out a lesson plan, and I'm starting to do the work and try to be that inclusive leader to say, here's my secrets. Here's what we do. And they're not secrets, but we need to share these elements a little bit better. So introductory activities, Focus on friends, inclusion, and belonging. Our end activity, focus on friends, inclusion, belonging. If you do a modified opening and closing circle or sharing circle, icebreakers, whatever it is you do, have to focus on those things. Then we get into those warm up, those free play elements. Then the main part, right? Focusing on those activities, teaching the skill, teaching the games, teaching those pieces. And then you're going to make sure you close it. And right, every coach tells me, I mean, you probably heard this a lot of time. We don't have time. We don't have time. We don't have time. You do have time. We have to make the time. If kids don't feel safe in that sense of belonging, and we don't lead that, and we don't implement that in our skill development, it is going to get missed, and we are going to focus on the game and the drill, and we're going to forget about the how. And the how is that inclusive piece of physical literacy. On the right-hand side, on that kind of creamy yellow side, is all the extra stuff we got to throw into our lessons. What high five principle are we working on? Play, friends, mastery, participation. Physical literacy, where's the physical literacy? Variety of environments. It's got to be fun with a purpose. It's got to be challenging. Starts with fundamental movement skills. Risky play elements. Beth Hudson talked a little bit about risky play. Trusting kids. You know, oh man, so many parents I hang out with, like we went for a nature hike the other day and the kids all had sticks and the kids were kind of all doing whatever they were doing with sticks. And all the parents I was with, there was a lot, were yelling at the kids to put the sticks down because they're dangerous toys. And what I saw was the sticks were swords and magic wands and princess wands and hiking sticks and sticks to ward off monsters and spirits in the forest. Kids weren't hitting each other with the sticks. The sticks were baseball bats with pine cones in the forest. And I just thought about risky play as a really cool learning experience and really sharing that knowledge a little bit better. Kids, you know, there are kids where you can't give them a stick. Look, I know that, but a lot of kids can make good decisions around that. And we can help them. We can teach them. This is all part of that inclusive perspective, right? So the right-hand side is a bit more of those skills. Safety considerations, physical safety, emotional safety. So many teachers and educators talk about safety, right? You can't have kids getting hurt because they get into trouble. No, we don't want kids getting hurt. But we also want to make sure they're physically and emotionally safe. And that is the inclusive piece of it. You know, the coach's oath is do no harm. And that's both physically and emotionally. So what are we going to do to keep our kids physically safe out in our lesson today? And what are we going to do to keep them emotionally safe in our lesson today? Skill development. What skill are we learning? Kicking, running, throwing, sharing, collaborating, rolling down a hill. Sharing where rolling down a hill is tumbling. And where is tumbling? Where is that? What other activities do we do tumble in? What other areas do we do that in? And fun. How do we bring the fun? Some of us are naturally fun. We just make people laugh. We have this energy. And some people are a bit more serious, and that's okay, a bit more shy. So how are they going to bring the fun? They're going to bring rubber chickens, and they're going to bring fun toys. Maybe they're going to tell a story. Maybe they're going to tell an appropriate joke, a developmentally appropriate joke. And then you can put on their contact information, of course, and a place to scan for more information. Don't try that keyword. It doesn't go anywhere. That Q code, it doesn't go anywhere. So when we're looking at inclusion and we're looking at physical literacy, it's those other things that we really have to start to focus on and start to talk about and start to teach. Otherwise, when we look at that wheel of physical literacy, where did it go? When we look at that wheel, here it is, physical literacy, the focus becomes on physical competence. It focuses on skill, and we forget about the human. And if we forget about the human, we are isolating too many kids, and we're still focusing on just those athletes. Okay? To close, I want you to think about a couple of things. I want to challenge you to think about a couple of things. I think I'll have a few minutes for some questions. Kids are curious. Human beings are curious. And we're looking at inclusion and physical literacy. It's that desire to know about others. It's that inquisitive interest in others, that interest in leading to inquiry. The example here is her natural curiosity led led her to ask more questions. Kids are naturally curious, and we're working in the inclusion space and in the playful space. Kids will walk up to other kids and ask curious questions, personal questions. And we need to embrace that and highlight that in our programs. Be curious, allow curiosity, but also give permission for kids or people just to say, I don't feel comfortable answering that question. You don't have to answer all the questions, but we are naturally curious. And that is a place where we can really bring together and focus on that ability to really create inclusive physical literacy programs. Inclusion is not bringing people into what already exists. We already know what exists systematically isn't working. It is making a new space, a better space for everyone. And I think that's what we're talking about when we look at inclusion in the physical literacy environment. In a couple of weeks, I'm going to teach a workshop that is only on inclusion. And in that workshop, we're going to talk about pronouns. We're going to talk about intersectionality. We're going to talk about spectrums, who people are. It is a free workshop. I'd love for you to join us as we dig a little bit even further. We get away from physical literacy and we get into really what inclusion is all about. So you can reach out to Thorsten. You can also email myself. Maybe somebody, Thorsten, you can throw the link in the chat. It's free. Join me. It's a couple hours long, and I'm going to really dig into this a little bit more and share with you some of the things that I've been working on over the ways. But I'm going to put this up there. You can take a screenshot of it if you like. But I think it's really about, if you look at this lesson plan compared to other lesson plans, we have definitely a much more inclusive experience. We will have a much more inclusive experience. And that's what truly makes physical literacy an inclusive concept. It's the how we do it. And so that's what I wanted to talk about today. So I'm done, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for chatting with me in the chat. And questions, comments, that's it. Yeah, you can reach out, and that's it. Hi, I'm done. Thanks for being here.
Wow. No, thank you, Sarah. Thanks for sharing your story. It was very genuine.